So today we have Lucinda Wright with us. Lucinda is the co-founder and CEO of Cask and Kettle. Cask and Kettle is a tea and coffee booze cocktails pods for your home brew systems. Before Cask and Kettle, Lucinda had stops at Meyer, Kellogg, Consumers Energy, and Whirlpool. Lucinda is a master of marketing and branding. Lucinda, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome. Glad to be here with you guys.
So I want to first start out with Cask and Kettle. You're the co-founder. And
Yep.
personally, I've heard a lot of back and forth. Some people say, you should have a co-founder or you shouldn't have a co-founder. From your experiences, do you like having multiple founders? Why would you recommend it to somebody else?
Yeah, so just really quick, because I think it's helpful to know someone's background a little bit because their advice to you sort of predicated upon that. So my answer is based on working 7 years in consulting at JPG Resources, where my job was to help people start up and or accelerate their young businesses, as well as found and run my own. So that's the background, seeing everybody in every other food category plus my own. And I would say based on the data set, it's very, very helpful to have a co-founder. If not one, multiple. The people that I see who are sole founders really struggle because it's very hard for one individual to have the full skill set to start up a company. So for instance, we have 4 co-founders and all of us have different skill set. So I ran marketing, sales, innovation, strategy, ran businesses. One of the other co-founders was head of supply chain for large companies. Another one ran an R&D company, and another one had background in testing and recall and crisis management and all of that. So I know that I can count on my fellow co-founders. If we get in a jam, I don't have to carry the whole load myself. So it doesn't have, you don't have to have 4. I'm not even advising 4, but I am saying that if you're a sole founder, it is a lot of weight to carry, and the people that I know who have been wish they'd taken on a co-founder.
Yeah. And now, what do you think about co-founders being in the same field, or does it not matter because they just have this passion? Or would you say, I'm a marketing major, I want to seek out somebody that's in finance and they're going to help co-found with me?
Yeah, I mean, if you're besties or your family, I think that trumps what I'm about to say, but let's set that aside. But you're not besties, you're not family. It's better to be a little more ruthless. You obviously have to have chemistry. You have to trust each other. You have to be willing to risk a lot with someone. So it's not a stranger off the street, but it is not as helpful to double down and have 2 marketers, for instance, because frankly, you're going to spend all your time doing the stuff you like to do and even arguing about it versus, okay, who's going to pay the bills? Who's going to manage the co-man? Who's going to make the call to the carriers? Who's going to work with the development? So it doesn't help carry the load. But family, besties trumps all that. But if you're consciously picking, I would go for diversity.
Yeah. So Cask and Kettle is essentially the first of its kind. You don't have any main competitors. How do you go about marketing a company that is completely new and trying to find your audience?
Yeah, no, super hard. We're not only the first in the US, we're the first globally, but just let's go to the US. When we launched, we had to go to Washington and meet with the federal regulatory agency called the TTB because they had to write federal regulations around our launch. That's how we were. So I thought we were going to have spent all these tens of thousands of dollars and potentially not be able to launch our business because the federal government wasn't going to let us. So it was dicey right from the beginning. And we sort of have a love-hate relationship with them in every other state. It's booze. I'm in booze. So state by state, I have to fight this. Not easy. Also in the spirit world, innovation in the spirit world is, okay, we're going to make something maple flavored or apple cinnamon or whatever. We're going to put it in a different shaped bottle or a bigger size bottle. There really isn't innovation. So the stakeholders aren't used to it. They just aren't. The buyers aren't, the distributors aren't, the suppliers aren't. So they can make their numbers if they don't sell 1 case of your stuff. So for those who are going to pioneer brand new segments within categories, much less brand new categories, and I've worked with founders who've done brand new categories as well, it is not for the faint of heart. It takes longer, more money, more challenging. Having said that, the multiples on a booze company are 17 to 21 times versus the average of 3 to 5. It takes longer to build. It's, riskier, but the reward's there too. So it just
Now, when you say average, are you just talking food-based or any company?
I'm used to food. Yeah, I'm talking food and beverage specifically because I'm not a tech background.
Yeah.
I'm not durable. I've worked in durable with Whirlpool, but I'm talking food and beverage. So the average multiple in a typical food and beverage is 3, 5, used to be 10, but not anymore. It's low, single digits. In the booze world, it's 17 to 21, and that's on like a vodka or whatever. So, but it's really tough to get to that spot. Really tough to get to that spot. So back to your questions, is a roundabout way, but you were talking about the difficulty when you're creating something new, and there's a continuum of something new. Most entrepreneurs are launching an incremental innovation in an existing segment, in an existing category. If anytime you step back from it's, new segment, same category, harder. New category, harder. So it's just the degree of risk, it's the degree of difficulty, and you just have to assess your tolerance for those two things as you're getting into it.
Yeah. So I was listening to a podcast that you were on, and you had mentioned that marketing to men and women are very different. With food especially, men are more likely the consumers, whereas the women are the ones buying the groceries for the family, they're the buyers. That just really stuck out to me. It was kind of interesting. So can you touch on that and explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, it is. My marketing brethren, get this wrong a lot of the time. And I'm not claiming that I was the smart one that figured this out, but I managed a brand called Kellogg's Raisin Bran early in my career. And you heard the podcast, so you know the answer. But for the rest of the audience out there, what % of consumption of Kellogg's Raisin Bran do you think are men? Now, you know the answer, but pretend you didn't. What would you guess? Or whoever's on the line guess. What would you just guess?
I would guess like 50%, I guess, if I didn't know.
Yeah, and the answer is 85.
Yeah. But
the number of women who purchase the brand is 90+%. Yeah. But the lesson there that I learned early on is that whoever is consuming your product, and this is true for tech, but this is true for products and services, does not matter. Whoever your end user / who's putting it in their mouth is your number one priority. You're that advocate. Who buys it, who influences it, doesn't mean you don't have to worry about that. You do, but you don't take your eye off the prize. Also, for whoever's on this line, if you're in food and beverage, men eat and drink a lot more than women. Additionally, men buy, they don't shop. And they're loyal. They don't switch it up as much as women, probably because their buying behaviors. I go, I find my thing, I buy, I leave. So the loyalty is much higher. Women are a lot more promiscuous, a lot, quicker wear out, or, they're shopping coupon, they're looking for deals. We're shoppers. So men eat and drink more. You make more money off of them because they're not dealing around trying to get or whatever. They stay forever until you honk them off. And so really they should be the first core target if you're in food and beverage that you should think about. Now, what I happen to know additionally in beverage is that men dominate consumption, are definitely the super heavy users. And the other thing we know about men, and I learned this again, cereal industry was great learning ground for me. We used to look at, remember you used to get toys in cereal back in the day? You guys are all too young, probably. So, but when I was on Raisin Bran Corn Flakes, we put toys and stuff, or at least the kids' cereals did. And so we did a lot of research on boys and girls and, younger kids and teens. And here's what you find consistently. Starts right out of the womb, I swear to God. And that is, boys will say, that's a girl toy, that's a girl dress, whatever it is, that's a girl thing, and they will not go for it. They reject it immediately. Girls will say, that's a boy toy, that's a boy, whatever. and they will drive a boy car, they will wear boy clothes, they will drink boy drinks, they don't care. I mean, women don't have a problem with that. As a matter of fact, at Kellogg's, there are early case studies that I had as a junior marketer with the launch of baked Lay's. And so salty snacks, potato chips, they decided to launch with the supermodel girly baked Lay's thing. And they learned really early in that was a huge mistake, because guess who eats the majority of salty snacks? Guys. And here you launched a chick brand, and they would not be seen with it, would not eat it, would not have it in their house, would not have it in their cart, and they couldn't recover. So we learned that case study pretty early in when you work in the marketing field. So back to, our target is men, for sure. Now in booze, you also have the shoppers and the consumers a little more equal. Men do buy a lot of booze. So, but if you weren't, then you may have to buy media. But even if you look at the advertisement on Nutri-Grain bars, which was my first launch, it was men breakfast skippers, right? If you saw that advertising, you might see a woman in the scene, but it's men eating it, and it's all about, hey, make sure your guy has this going out the door. So you have to think about it, but it's not your target.
Mm-hmm. Now, is this how most food brands go about it? They mainly target men, or no?
No, I would say most. I mean, I've had to fight for 2 years. Every agency, everybody I come into contact, my digital group now knows, do not come back and beg me to target women anymore. First, I get women flock to our brand no matter what, because we are more advanced. We're in the know more. I don't have to work hard to get them, but to get men is really expensive, and you have to work on it. So they've stopped trying to beg and plead, because they've seen when we stop targeting, then we go 100% women, and that's a problem. So no. Vast majority of people go women. As a matter of fact, let me give you another example, and I promise I'll stop. My husband just wrote into a protein company he runs, and he said to me, he's like, hey, what's up with this brand? I really like this brand, but all the marketing is like women in yoga outfits or whatever. And I'm like, a guy, is this for women? Should I not? I'm like, no. They just screwed up. Because women are buying this online, so they think whatever. He's like, I'm going to just ask them. So he wrote in and said, hey, all of your marketing is like for women. I'm a dude, 60, superintendent, runner. Like, is this okay for me? So he didn't think the brand was for him. Mm-hmm. And it's a protein drink, for heaven's sakes, for like serious runners. So no, my brethren are 100%. It's women target, because they confuse purchasers and consumers. That they confuse that. And unless you worked on a male-driven brand, which I did early, Nutri-Grain bars, followed by Raisin Bran, followed by Corn Flakes, unless you work on that, you don't really come to that epiphany.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So somewhat recently, I've recognized Cask and Kettle in Walmart. Yep. When I talked to you earlier about this, you said it was really easy to sell to them, which kind of surprised me. And you said that's because they encourage innovation. Now, is this something that you've only seen with them, or is it becoming a more common theme with big box stores?
The landscape has really changed. You can tell, like, I'm old, right? So I'm at the end of my career, and you guys are all early in it. So a couple decades ago, Whole Foods used to be the nurturing innovation retailer for new foods and beverages. They were the nurturers, and you could go to them. They wouldn't be slotting. They wanted innovation in their stores. They really nurtured it. And then they got greedy / whatever, changed their philosophy and fell out. And then it was, believe it or not, Target, Costco, Safeway had an incubator on the West Coast where they would waive certain fees and nurture people. And now Target's not that way anymore. Safeway's not that way anymore. Costco still is. They are, but they have a rule where they won't take you on if they're going to be the majority of your business, because they've had too many small companies be too reliant on them. So you have to work your way through that. Aside from that, they are very nurturing of innovation. Historically, Meijer's been very nurturing, HEB. So there are retailers across the country that are known to really seek out and have built their brand name as a retailer around innovation, treasure hunty kind of stuff. And Walmart has not historically, but they've seen that leakage, is what's called in the retail world. They've seen the leakage of their business to these other big retailers. So they have really stepped it up and are now, offering a handout to young companies, to give them a hands up. So they're the first large retailer that did that for us. And yeah, it took me like 7 minutes to sell in. But we can talk about what I had knowledge though to sell in. So we got to talk through that. You don't go into a major retailer without having an understanding of the size of prize of your business and the other foundational stuff. But yes, there are definitely retailers, and they would surprise you, who are nurturing of innovation, and others who you think would. For instance, I would have thought Kroger would, for instance. No. They're like, you get big, you come back and talk to us. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. So Costco then, you said they really don't want your product if they're the only store, that's selling it. To me, why would that be? If your product is selling off their shelves and they're the only store you can get it from, customers may come in just to get it there.
Well, think of the club format. So let's talk channel for a minute.
Yeah.
So this is a club format. Unless you're a Kellogg's Raisin brand where you're going to be on shelf 365, the club model are quarterly rotationals. Not there forever. You're there a couple of months and then you're out and the next rotation is in, unless you're a huge iconic brand. So the last thing they want is, and I applaud them for this responsibility. They don't want to be responsible for killing off a small brand because you're only going to be there X number of weeks and then it goes away. And that's a lot of money you have to put in to surge up to serve a Costco, and then it goes away. There's not an ongoing business. So they're being responsible. I mean, there are ways around it, don't get me wrong. We just had Costco call us since we last talked, and we're going to be selling into them in Louisiana, but they're not even remotely half my business. I don't have a problem with that right now, is even as little and as young a company as we are. So I applaud them for that. But I've had clients on the consulting side who sold into Costco and used that to catapult their business. But that's not a no-brainer way. So that's so you have club, then you have mass. So that's where Target and Walmart and Meijer fit in. Then you have traditional grocery. That's where Kroger, Safeway, H-E-B, Wegmans, Publix, blah, blah, blah. Those guys fall. And then you have convenience food stores, which is hot right now for a lot of food and beverages, especially on the better for you eating side of the world. Those formats are really on fire. Those are the major channels. And then you have drugs trying to get into it, like the Walgreens of the world, but they're really only taking the big guys, and it's not a good place to go for innovation.
Right.
But the C-stores are. Matter of fact, Monster launched their whole business C-store. I don't know if very many people know that, but they did. They launched C-store. That's how they launched their entire business.
Now, what is C-store?
Convenience stores. So, okay. Where you get gas and you go in. So Johnny's, Tesco, Wawa, I don't know where people are from who are on the call. Meijer is a C-store. Those places. So where you're getting gas and you're going in for snacks and whatever. Those. Nuvu here. In fact, look at Johnny's and Nuvu versus like old school, marathon stations or something. I mean, they're really higher end now. Mm-hmm. Our products are sold in a number of C-stores around the Detroit area that sell a lot of booze that are really high end shishi, and they've got a gas pumps out front.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. One of your biggest hurdles, obviously, with being an alcohol brand is regulations. Every state is different, creating a difficult, situation to spread your brand nationally. What sort of strategy do you take there in order to make those hurdles a little bit less of a burden, I guess?
Well, I mean, I wish I could say that it's anything other than tenacity, and because there is an element of that. Now, having said that, there is a level of strategy. So in the booze world, and we can talk about food and beverage in a second. So you can talk about the difference between the USDA, the FDA, and the TTB, because those are the regulatory bodies across alcohol and non-alcohol food and beverage. So the TTB, you have to get past them. Everything has to be approved through them nationally. Everything, packaging, branding, formulas, ingredients, all of it. And then you have to do that all over again, state by state. When you're not in alcohol, you have to, there are regulations that the FDA sets. And there's a software called Genesis, for instance, that you can run, and you don't have to submit something to the FDA. You have to be FDA compliant, know all the rules and regulations, and have an expert run that for you for your side panel, but that's it. You don't have to go state by state, and you don't have to submit anything. You have to, if you don't abide by the rules, you're going to get in trouble, but that's it. The USDA, so meat, cheese, those guys, yeah, same thing. They want to see the packaging. They're not approving necessarily your food, but they're approving everything around how you talk about it. And then there's regulation at the plant level, but there's not regulation, state by state. So regardless, if you're going to be in food and beverage, you have some level of regulatory oversight you have to deal with. And all of that means you have to have money set aside to do it. There's just how much or how little, but there's a bucket on your P&L that has to go for regulatory experts to ensure you don't get sideways on something.
Yeah. When branding a new company or a product, what's the number one detail that should be focused on?
Okay, so there's actually the elements, so I don't know how familiar everyone on the call is in basic positioning, but you can't escape it. And it's the strategic background of your business. And it's as basic as you're taught in school, and you can't escape it. Every large CPG company or every marketing company does it. They may call it something different, but it's the same elements. So you first have to start with what's the consumer insight, whether that's a need, whether that's a pain point, whether that's a desire, whatever it is, whatever the consumer reason for your product and brand to exist, you have to know what that is. Next, you have to know your target. And it's, the age and how much money and where you live and all of the demographic stuff is the least helpful thing when you're doing targeting. Think values, attitudes, lifestyles. It does matter, male, female, it does. So that's the one thing I think gender, in fact, does matter, but rarely does age or income or all of that, really rarely. It's about what you believe, how you behave, what you value, that you have to really hone in on. And you can have a primary and secondary, not unusual. Then your competitive frame, both direct and indirect. I don't have any direct, as you know. Most people do. Most people do. If you've got a bar, you've got a million directs. If you've got a energy drink, you've got a million direct competitors. So you have to know how you stack up. And then as important are the indirects, in which is who's also taking that share of wallet or that share of stomach. Now I have indirects. Don't have directs, but I have indirects. And that's all the iced, ready to drink coffees that are out there. It's someone who wants to DIY it at their house. It's, bars and restaurants, to the extent that they do hot, cocktails. So you have to know what those are. And a lot of times the indirect can be the most helpful to you in carving out a differentiated space, to be honest. And then you have what is your unique benefit, your point of difference, your brand, whatever you call it. It's called different things. And that is, brand promise might be the easiest way to think about it in this context. And then after that, why should anybody believe your promise? I mean, those are the elements. And so every single entrepreneur, or not. So I was an entrepreneur even when I didn't have my own business, because in marketing, you run everybody else's business. So I was an entrepreneur with someone else's money. But every business I've ever been on or helped anybody else with, we did this document first. And you may have multiples of these. You may have multiple insights, multiple benefits, multiple, combinations of reasons to believe or targets. And then the other thing is you have to go validate it. You have to quantitatively validate it. It doesn't cost that much, and you have to do it. So that is the cornerstone of any business, is that thinking.
Yeah. Now, how important is packaging and color schemes to either making or breaking the sale of the product?
Okay, so especially for entrepreneurs, but it's true at big brands too. Packaging is the #1 communication vehicle for any business, any brand. It just is. It is.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most important. In food and beverage, 70+% of the decisions are made at shelf. Now that assumes, so for me, when you're creating a new segment, that's problematic. So we'll come back to that because that's a different set. Let's just go with people who are launching and have a direct set. So you're at the shelf, and that's where 70+% of decisions are made. Your packaging is the communication that either gets you breakthrough and someone's attention and gets you the sale, or it doesn't. So it's also why you have to think about in situ. I mean, I can't tell you how many founders, just don't even do a basic store walk. Don't even know what their set looks like. And I learned that in the Meijer time. I will say I learned a lot of things from my time at Meijer, but one was the value of walking the retail stores and seeing who's in the set. The other thing is, for most people who are launching businesses, there are multiple places in the store where you could sell in, and they have different direct competitors. And so what your packaging would need to do to break through would be different depending. So beverage, just work with me in a beverage. Beverages are over in the fresh set, over in the case where the salad dressings and whatever, all the fresh stuff, they're in the aisle. They're in the refrigerated set where the milks and juices and all that stuff are. Some of them are in the yogurt set, depending on if you're doing a kefir or whatever you're doing. So there's 4, and that's just a mainstream grocery. There are 4 different places that beverage could be. And 4 very different jobs that it would have to do, 4 very different P&Ls, 4 very different margin expectations and go to market, very different consumer targets that are going there. So, packaging is not the place to try to save money.
Yeah. And now those different sections of the store where it can be located, is that dictated by you, or say, your products in Walmart, is it dictated by them?
Well, they will dictate it if you don't.
Okay.
And if you don't have rationale for it, they'll dictate it. Now, they're all different buyers as well. The buyer over in the fresh set, so you know what I'm talking about, where the naked is and, all of that. So I'm trying to pick something that everyone in the call will know. The yogurt-based stuff. Buyer is different than if you want where buy is in the aisle. Different buyer. That's a whole different sales call. It's different than Good Valley or the hard coffees or iced coffees, which are over by the milk and the juices and the whatever, and the kefirs or the yogurt buyer. So you have to decide, because you're making a different sales call. And they're not going to carry you in multiple places. You will not be in multiple places in the store. A buyer will make a decision. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So for food, I'm not totally sure. When you want to seek funding, do you go about it similar ways as other brands? Is there VC spaces for food companies? How do you attack raising funds?
Okay, so VCs and PEs don't come into play until you're above $1 million, really until you're above like $3 to $5 million. So put that out of your head, because unless you launch and go to multiples of millions right away, you might as well not even think that.
Yeah.
So then from there, most people, we didn't take a normal route. No, not going to be a surprise to you. So I'm going to give you a breadth. Most people tend to go to angels and do all this pitching stuff. And we did not. I mean, that's the traditional. Traditional is pitching, go pitch, angels, competition, whatever. That's university funds, pitch. That's the traditional role, and that's what 95% of people do. We are old, and so what we did is we had family and friends and colleagues. So we raised over $1 million just with people that we worked with or our family and friends that said, if you're going to do this, then we want to do this with you.
Mm-hmm.
Given the idea, and of course we validated the idea. It wasn't just because we thought it was a good idea. The first money check I wrote was to validate quantitatively the idea. First check I wrote. So it's not like we took our family and friends and colleagues' money without knowing we were risking all of ours. But that's the way we went. And then we have one fund and one of our advisors, because y'all should have advisory boards too. It's not just about co-founders, it's about advisory boards, working advisory boards. One of our advisors connected me with the Bell Impact Group out of Detroit, and they only invest in Michigan-based businesses and in women-owned businesses. Less than 1% of the spirits companies are women-owned and operated, and we're based out of Battle Creek, and our distillery is in Temperance, Michigan. So I went to meet with them. They put us through a full due diligence. I had to present. It was, quite something. But these are like the most powerful women of Michigan. It's really interesting to be in front of that kind of a group. So there are only an institutional investor, if you will. Everybody else are individual, and we did a convertible note with an 8% interest and between 2 and 3 year fuses with a 20% convertible. So that's what we did. So convertible notes, larger investors. I literally have done one pitch, and it's just because we were asked to go up to the Traverse City Angel Group. So
will that be TC New Tech?
Yeah,
okay.
Not tech though, not tech.
Oh.
Yeah, the TC. Although there were tech people in there, maybe they were called tech. Because that's the other thing I want to talk about. The food and beverage guys get screwed on the money side. In the state of Michigan, the money is all in medical or durable or in tech. If you're a food and beverage, there is literally little to no money in Michigan allocated for, which is interesting given we're an ag state, very little. So we went, and that's the only pitch I've done. We won, of course. Go green. So we won. But yeah, there was like a heart doctor up there, like something like keeps your heart alive, like in surgery, and people doing whatever. And so we won the $500 or whatever. But that's the only time I've gotten up and done some like pitch thing. But it is the reality for someone early in their career and younger people, that it is probably the reality that you're going to be doing angels and pitches. The other thing about if you're in food and beverage that's hard, I just want you to just accept that it's hard, is most of the angels are tech. Or because we're such an automotive, there's some device or there's some, and so it is not fun when you're pitching or talking to investors who don't understand food and beverage. It is not a fun scene. So you have to, the way you put the deck together, who you have there with you to kind of provide, some credibility and allow them to answer some of the questions that, they think founders are skating around on or whatever. I've been on a number, when I was in the consulting side, I was in a number of investor calls with our clients.
Mm-hmm. So I have a few more questions before we open up the floor for Q&A.
Okay.
For those students that are founding companies, what would you suggest to them when they're trying to build their team?
Yes, so funny that you, this is an ongoing, so I have a point of view that, again, not going to surprise you, is contrary to most. I very consciously build, you already know, I answered this already, the co-founder, by the way. I consciously build diverse teams. I have no interest in someone who's a mini me. I already have a me. I have no interest. And so I always look to build a diverse team. Having said that, it's a lot more complicated and hard to manage a diverse team than a bunch of mini yous running around. It's, you know, there's more. If you think that disagreements or, you know, strong disagreements is conflict, then you can't handle a diverse group. I don't have a high need for agreement. Everyone tells me I'm wrong 24 hours a day. If I had a high need for agreement and I view disagreement as conflict, then I couldn't do my job.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean in the end I don't make the decision, because I do. If I have to take the responsibility, I get to make the decision, and they know that. But no one's blowing smoke up my skirt, for sure. I don't have anybody in the team that wouldn't say what they really, 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 really thought. So having that aside, the logical first members of the team on a startup are going to be someone in sales, because you got to drive revenue. So, but the sales, you know, personnel should pay for themselves, frankly. Mm-hmm. And I had a discussion with our sales team this morning because we're renegotiating our contract, and we chatted about this. We had a chat, expense and the commensurate outputs of that, and what my expectations were for the money we were paying. So sales, logical. Someone to run the financials, QuickBooks, all of that, if you don't have that skill set, logical. And if you're making food and beverage, you have to have someone who can find and manage commands and the whole supply chain. That's assuming that the founder is a marketer, because branding, idea, all that comes before you do anything else. Because here's the deal. You have to convince a co-man to make your stuff. You have to pitch them, because they don't want to nurture innovation either. Very few co-mans nurture innovation. And if they don't believe in your idea, they're not going to bring you on, and you don't have a business if you don't have a co-man in food and beverage. So it all starts with positioning, all starts with branding, all starts with the validation of the business idea, because every move you make, you're going to have to convince people the opportunity cost of spending their time supporting you versus somebody else.
Yeah. So for our students that aren't or don't plan on being founders and see themselves more as entrepreneurs, as you described earlier in your career, you were an entrepreneur with other people's money. What sort of advice can you give to those students to maybe prepare themselves, or just how to go about being an entrepreneur?
Well, it depends on what your long-term goal is. If your long-term goal is to launch or run your own company, my advice is different than if your long-term goal is to grow up in traditional companies. Right? So let me just take both of those. Or yeah, let's just break it down in that. So deep or wide. Basically, just to simplify it, you can have successful careers going wide or deep. So if you want to run your own business, or you want to run, so when I worked at all those businesses, I ran all of those, right? The marketers running all those businesses. When I was in consulting, I was advising people running their businesses. That's, you know, they're paying me, so it's not my money. When I was at Consumers Energy, whatever, all of them, I'm running a business. And to do that, you have to have a breadth of skills. And marketers are hubs. They're not spokes. They don't actually do anything. What you do is set the strategy and the goals for everyone, and then you have to work to get them to achieve that. So I wasn't necessarily smart in my career enough to do this, but what I did benefited me, which is I went for as broad of experience as I could. Whether that was types of brands, whether that was types of companies, whether that was categories. I had a supply chain career, I had a brand marketing career, I had a retail career, I had consulting. And so at this point in my career on a startup, there isn't much I haven't seen, although I decided to launch this alcohol brand, which I didn't have. So now I've had to learn all that the hard way. So the more you want to run things, my suggestion is the broader experience you try to get. Now, whether that's going into a company and leveraging it to as many assignments as you can, or doing that and then leveraging to different companies to get, what you need. It depends on how much risk you're willing to take. It's also your risk profile. Now,
Yeah.
if you know you want to be a COO or head of supply chain or whatever, then you focus on that. And you go for a variety of assignments within that function that allows you to specialize and become an expert in that area in order to progress up.
Okay. Yeah. That's awesome advice. So we're at about 45 minutes. I want to make sure we let Q&A come in. But the last thing is, what can we expect to see from Casket Kettle in the future, and where can we find the product?
Yeah, so we're going to be in Meyer in November and December. They gave us the end cap with the top 4 spirits in the company or in the category. So I'm really thrilled, as you can imagine. Now I'm so thrilled. So we have to sell. But Meyer, Walmart's been really good to us. We're hoping to expand with them. Sam's Club rolling out, not in Michigan. They're giving us 100 stores, which is half of their stores in the country. Costco in the South. Then we're in a lot of, independents. So in the booze world too, the independents play a really big role. So on our website, there's a store locator, and your location, populates it, and then where we have distribution pops up, so you can see where to buy us. But in alcohol, there's an interesting strategy between independents and chains and clubs. So if anybody decides to go into booze, give me a call and I can take you through. I won't bore everybody else, but there's another layer of strategy when you're in the alcohol industry.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll give a couple minutes here. If anybody has any questions, throw them in the Q&A, and then I will relay them to Lucinda.
Don't be shy.
You figure with virtual, people would be more willing to ask questions, right? They don't have to stand up and ask in front of a group of people.
Yeah, and I would say to whoever's out there, I don't know who it is or how many, the least risky place. This is the place to practice, either exposing your thinking or capitalizing on other people's thinking. It doesn't get any easier or better than this. So if this makes you nervous or you're reluctant to do it, that's a worrisome thing. You're gonna have to get over that.
Do have one right here. It says, what is the biggest lesson you have to give us? Not just marketing, but in life.
Mental toughness. I would say that it has been amazing to me how many different entities, circumstances have tried to hold our head underwater to make us go away. And if I didn't know and believe in what we were doing and the value of it, and I wasn't, tough mentally, to work through the challenges, then we wouldn't do it. It would work. It would work to get rid of us. And I would say that that's just true. You're young in your career, this is going to happen. Lots of circumstances are going to come up, some that you generate and others that are done unto you. And you can decide whether or not you're running away from something, or you're going to, figure out how to run to something, or you're going to decide you're going to overcome it and push through. But you really, you can't control everybody else, but you can control you. And so you have to decide what you can live with. And I would encourage you to just be tough, be tenacious and be tough and believe.
There's another one. So in the same way that beer companies have created seltzers around White Claw, do you anticipate that either coffee companies or alcohol companies will create a competitor for you someday?
That is the number one investor question, and I love answering it. You should have seen it, from the stage of the Traverse City, whatever. It's just, I get very emotive about this. Here, I mean, it actually would, for those of you out there, so when I was on Morningstar Farms, I ran Morningstar Farms Veggie Burgers in the late 90s, early 2000s. So only Garden Burger was out there, and Morningstar Farms is the #1 brand. It's very hard to be the biggest and owner. You have to do all the work. So I'd rather just be able to win at shelf and have someone else help me educate people and drive them to the shelf. So there's some advantage, you know, to having that. But here's why it's not going to happen. It's going to, if we get a direct competition, it's going to be someone else who are like us, who have enough experience in weird, you know, in varied ways to pull it off. So the coffee companies aren't going to do it because booze is really hard. Really, 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 really add a million realities. Also, coffee boards, I'm finding, are very like nervous about being in booze. So the coffee companies aren't going to do it. They'll buy us potentially. So these are all targets of people who may purchase our company. But the coffee guys, so Keurig, Anheuser-Busch do the DrinkWorks, the machine that does the pods, and Anheuser-Busch is running that. Keurig's not running that. So the coffee guys aren't going to do it. It's a whole infrastructure they don't have. Their salespeople couldn't do it. They have no strategic capabilities in place to do it. Buy it, okay. The booze companies won't do it because they think it's this cute little, oh, look at that cute little thing. Little whatever niche thing that is. And coffee, I want to remind everybody, is the #1 consumed beverage in the world. And hot coffee is the vast majority of the consumption of coffee. But the spirits companies and distributors have convinced themselves that the ice thing, because guess what? Booze companies do cold stuff in glasses and cans. So what can you do in glasses and cans and launch them that are cold? So we're the opposite of that. We can go cold. In fact, lots of our team brews them or pours it in cold water because we're liquid. Our pods are liquid, so you can drink it hot or cold. But if you're ready to drink bottle or can, you can't go hot. You can't. And most of them are beer, to your point. We have a whiskey, a tequila, a vodka. We're looking at a light rum. I mean, we can go across the board. I have no problem coming up with drinks. I have no problem coming up with new businesses. We're using our pods in salad dressings now, boost up salad dressings and frostings. I mean, I don't have an end to the innovation I can do off of our platform, but the booze companies think cold can bottles. So it's this cute little thing, you know, good luck to them, it's cute, whatever. So they're not going to do it. They're going to wait for us to build it, make it happen, and then, you know, buy us. The other thing, and then I'll stop, is the product development on our product, not a no-brainer. I can tell you already, because I have 2 years of it, coffee developers can't do it on their own. Spirits developers can't do it on their own. Beverage developers can't do it on their own. We're doing all of our own development now because we're the only ones that can marry all that. It just doesn't exist. So if you're a spirits company and think your R&D group's going to get it, no, they're not. If you're in a coffee company and think your R&D group's going to get it, no, they're not. So that's the other piece. We can't patent it. It's not trademarkable, but the IP on the recipes is no joke hard.
Yeah. So now having no main competitors, does this allow you to take more risk, or do you still kind of treat your strategy as there's another competitor kind of breathing down your neck type deal?
I never think, and it's interesting, I mean, our other co-founders, other people, you know, think like that, but I've managed so many businesses that, so on cornflakes, Raisin Bran, I had direct competitors at Mills who like had exact Raisin Brans and private label own brand. I mean, I've already been there, done that. Like none of that rattles me. And as I said, more money to help educate. My #1 problem on my business is educating people on what we are. Because they're like, are you all booze? Are you just coffee? I mean, it's very straightforward concept. The booze and the concentrates are all there, you're done, boom. But consumers make it unicorn complicated. And so my biggest problem is just awareness and understanding. And if someone else was out building that, then, you know, best woman win on branding, value, taste delivery. So I spend 0 time thinking about it or worrying about it. But it's really hard, slow, and expensive to do it by yourself.
Mhm. Well, it appears that that is the last of our Q&A. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I just want to thank you for coming in and giving us, an hour of your time today.
My pleasure. I want you guys to be successful for sure. Go green.
Go White.
Bye, everyone.
Why?
Bye.